Hey, I'm Steve Knotts. Welcome to EQ and filter types. This video is for people who hate EQing and don't know which EQ or filter to pick when they're working on tracks. I got some good news for you. There are only 7 basic kinds of EQs and filters that you need to know as a producer. And in this video, we're going to play with them in Ableton Live. You'll see what they are, what they're called, how they sound, and you'll have a better idea of what to use when you're working on your tracks. So here's a piece of music, and we're going to start right now in EQ8 with this drop-down list of different filter shapes or EQ types. I'll start with the low shelf EQ. This is something you know from a DJ mixer or EQs on your stereo, and it sounds like this. Boost, cut. Just like the tone knob on a stereo where you have a high and low or bass and treble, or in a DJ mixer, the low knob is a low shelf EQ. It's boosting or cutting all the low frequencies beyond a set point. The opposite one to that is the high shelf EQ. Let's hear that. I'm going to set the frequency up a little bit higher. Boost and cut. Here's a cool trick. If you double click in Ableton in the EQ8 window, this expands. Just double click in the frequency area. You can see a frequency spectrum and get a better view. Again, the high shelf EQ is like a shelf. Everything above that frequency gets boosted or cut. And this is like the EQs on a DJ mixer, the high knob. The frequency is set at some fixed point, and you can choose to either boost it or cut. And for another real world example, check this out. My mic has a high shelf and a low shelf EQ. I'm going to demonstrate right now. Here's high shelf boost, high shelf boost, high shelf boost. All that high gets boosted up, a little too much. High shelf cut, a little darker, a little muddier, kind of sounds like I'm underwater. Now we're going to go to low shelf, EQ boost, more bass coming in. Low shelf, EQ cut, low shelf, EQ cut. Sounds a little bit drier and a little bit more like my voice is kind of up in the air. And here we are back to flat. So high shelf EQ and low shelf EQ are some of the most common popular EQs in the world. They're on home stereos, in DJ mixers, and they're very simple because it's just 2 knobs and it's kind of like the tone, the basic tone. So let's get a little bit more detailed now. We have some other options in EQ. How about this middle shaped one, Parametric EQ or the bell curve? What's this one gonna do? This is good for working with the mid-range because you can pick the frequency where you want it to operate and then boost or cut. Let's pretend this is a DJ mixer with a fixed EQ at 1 kilohertz. That's right there, about 1000 hertz. This is the mids on your DJ mixer. Vocals, instruments, that kind of thing are going to be right there. Boost and cut. There are some more controls about how wide or narrow the frequency range is. Don't worry about that. We can go into more detail on that later. The main idea with Parametric EQ is that it's working in the mid-range. You can boost or cut instruments or sounds in one instrument to pull out some details. What if we want to find like the melody? It gets kind of brighter in the mids. And again, you'll find Parametric EQ is like the most common EQ to use in your productions because it lets you find a specific frequency and then boost it if you want more, or cut it if you need to remove something and get less of it. The golden rule of EQ is cut before you boost. We'll talk about that again later. Let's just go for some other basic types. How about this one that looks like a number 7 laying down, like an L? Whoa. This is a high pass filter. Only the high frequencies are going to pass through. And as we change the frequency, it tells you where the frequencies are being removed. So right now, 1 kilohertz, basically everything under 1000 hertz is getting removed. You can sweep it all the way up to the top. And you got almost nothing. Papery, whispery sounds up on the high frequencies, all the way down to the lows and subs. So high pass filter means the high frequencies are passing. And the opposite of that is the low pass filter. Only the low frequencies are passing. I'm showing you these in pairs. We have the shelf EQ, high and low shelf, and now we have pass filters, high pass and low pass. Low pass filters are one of the classic sounds in electronic music. If we add some resonance right here and boost the cutoff frequency, you get that cool classic electronic music sound is a low pass filter moving on the beat, maybe automated with an LFO or something. It's like that. So low pass filters are really fun for sound design. High pass filters are a common mix tool if you want to remove extra bass out of a sound that doesn't need low end, like a hi-hat or a vocal or something. You might use a high pass filter to remove the extra lows. And I'll stop there without too many detailed mix decisions. There's a lot more you do with these in action when you're mixing. But so far we talked about 4 of them: low shelf and high shelf EQ, low pass and high pass filter. What's the difference between a high pass filter like this or a low shelf EQ with some cut? The high pass filter is going to remove more of the low frequencies. So that's like a steep thing of like really getting rid of everything in the bass. The low shelf EQ is like if you want to bring down everything equally, but you're not trying to totally cut out low frequencies. And that's something you should learn and practice more. I could talk about it all day, but it's more fun to learn by actually doing it yourself with these EQs where you can hear how they sound. What if you have a problem in the mid-range and you really got to get out some frequencies? Well, this little one that looks like a V shape is a notch filter. This is where you really can cut out a whole bunch of stuff, usually in the mid-range. So let's look for a mid-range sound. There was a kind of a peep sound up in the higher area. And let's see if we can identify it. Right there. Pew, pew, pew. So with this filter off, you see that spike coming up? We're gonna find that sound. Put the mouse on the line, read the box, 1.49, 1.5 kilohertz. So if I dial in this notch filter right there to 1.5 kilohertz and switch it on, listen to what it sounds like. That peep sound is quieter. Once again, without the filter. Pew, pew, pew. And with the filter. So a notch filter helps you eliminate and remove a nasty resonant frequency or sound that you don't like. Like a vocal, if there's too much s and you need a de-esser, or there's too many harsh sibilant frequencies up top, you can roll your notch filter up to where the voice is kind of peaking and going and cut those down. Or if there was like noise in a recording, you could go to that place where the noise is happening, like a rumble or something, and cut that out. Or if you have something like a drum kit and there's just kind of a low, like woof, 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 too much cruddy, muddy bass stuff in the break loop or the drum loop, not the kick drum, but just the drum beats. Sometimes you can put a notch filter in at like, I don't know, 270 or 280 or something and cut out some of the nasty resonances that you don't want, which lets you turn up the rest of the drums louder and get the sound you do want. I like to think of EQing like making a fruit salad. Peel the fruit first, and then you put the fruit in the bowl. You don't take a banana and throw the whole thing in the fruit salad and have people trying to eat the banana peel because it's gonna get in the way. Cut before you boost is like cut off the nasty part you don't want, and then you can keep more of what you do want. So the notch filter is a great tool for operating in the mid-range, and the opposite of a notch filter, we're gonna have to make this by hand. It's a band pass filter, which is something you use when you only wanna keep the mid-range and you don't wanna keep the highs or the lows. So let's create a band pass filter by making a high pass filter. Let's say we're gonna cut off the lows. Now we're gonna go to band 2 and switch in the low pass filter. So band 2 is a low pass filter, only the low frequencies are passing. Band 1 is a high pass filter, only the high frequencies are passing. And this allows us to only have a band of frequencies in the middle, or a band pass filter, and we're only keeping this stuff in the middle. This is something you could do with a keyboard, for example. If you don't want the real bass part of the keyboard, and you also don't want the real bright, glinty, like high frequency stuff. If you have a keyboard that's fitting in the middle of your mix, you have a high frequency synth lead on top and a low sub bass on the bottom, you only want the keys right in the middle, a bandpass filter is something that could serve that purpose really well. Let's just bypass the whole thing. There's the full mix. And there's the bandpass filter. Another place you hear a bandpass filter in real life is on your phone. Your mobile speaker cannot produce bass. It's not big enough. And the human voice, you don't need a ton of super high frequency information to understand what people are saying. So the telephone is a classic place where people have a bandpass filter. They're using it every day, all the time. You don't know that's what it's called, but that's what it's doing. You don't need the super high frequency airy information. You don't need the super low sub bass, just the mids. So that's a basic tour of the EQ and filter types. Notice that in live, there's also this 4x thing that makes a super steep filter. So this would be a bandpass filter with really steep filter slope, cutting off really a lot of the sound. You might have heard vocals in some albums where they go to this kind of thing, like right before the drop, and they cut off everything into a narrow band that sounds like an old radio. You do that with a bandpass filter. And if you really want to know, set your bandpass filter to like 500 hertz and 3 kilohertz to get your vocals to sound like that kind of old school sound. Add a little distortion and you're good to go. So those are the basic filter types and EQs you need to know. High shelf and low shelf EQ for working the bass and treble like a DJ mixer. Parametric EQ for the mid-range. Then we have notch EQ for cutting out stuff in the mid-range. Low pass filter for taking off all the highs. High pass filter for taking off all the lows. And then a band pass filter when you only want the mids. Those are just 7 EQs and filters that let you do everything you need to do to make a great mix. Notice I'm not talking about graphic EQ. That's another story and I'm not going to talk about it. It's kind of fun for sound design, but you don't really need it for music production. Let's just go quickly through. I don't want to be on here all day, but I want to show you a couple other places we have these EQs in Ableton Live and see if we can figure out what they are and what they're doing. This one's called EQ3. This is basically the DJ mixer. Low boost, low cut. That is a shelf EQ. Low shelf, boost, and cut. Mid-range, boost, and cut. Just like on a DJ mixer. And the highs. High shelf EQ cut, high shelf EQ boost. And these frequencies let you dial in where the mid-range is going to be. It's picking the high shelf location and the low shelf location. But the effect is basically defining how much mid-range you're going to have. Okay, so that's low shelf EQ, mid-range parametric or bell curve, and high shelf. What is in the channel EQ? This is kind of a fun one, a little bit of a newer device. First off, here's this little icon that looks kind of like that number 7 thing. High pass filter on off. This is choosing first order high pass filter, which is set to 80 hertz. So if you want to cut everything below 80 hertz, you can kick that in right there. Otherwise, the low knob is doing a low shelf. Real easy to see. There it is. The high knob is doing a high shelf. So again, this is kind of like a DJ mixer. And the mid-range is doing cut and boost, and you can pick the frequency in the mids. I like channel EQ better than EQ3, honestly. This is a lot more like how I would use an EQ. Let's cut out a little bit of the mud around 300 hertz, boost up a little bit of the highs, jack up the lows, and this is what you call the happy face EQ. It's a smile. Like the lows and highs are boosted, mids are cut out, makes kind of a smiley shape. That is usually what people do on music. Amateur DJs do that all the time. They jack up the lows, crank up the highs, cut the mids down a little bit. It's like that happy face curve, which is kind of exaggerated. It's fun to do that, but don't do that on every mix, on every track. What else do we have? Auto filter is a really fun one. So auto filter, we have, high pass filter shape. And you can look at the info box on the side. So we have auto filter selected. High pass filter removes the low frequencies. Low pass filter removes the highs. And auto filter is fun because it gives you a nice clean band pass filter right here. Let's make this not so steep. Now you can easily dial in what part of the sound feels right. And just set that to pick out the band of frequencies you want to hear. And then we have the notch filter. And this sounds cool when it's moving. And what did we say, 1.5? Cutting out that little ping at 1.5. Off. On. So here we have with the auto filter device, pure filters for removing sounds you don't want. And if you want to keep your filters moving, it's great for sound design for creative stuff. Let's move on. Why did I pick out drum bus right here? Well, check this out. The damping frequency on drum bus is down to 500 hertz. Is that a high shelf EQ or a low pass filter? I'm actually not sure how they built that. It sounds like a gentle low pass filter or possibly a high shelf EQ because I still hear some high frequencies and they're attenuated or reduced. So when you know what type of EQs are available, you can recognize them in other devices. Pointing out the compressor, just to show you that within the sidechain function, sometimes you want to EQ the sidechain source to control exactly what sound is triggering your sidechain compression. And look what we have right here. Filter type. High, low shelf, parametric, low shelf EQ, parametric EQ, high shelf EQ. Low pass filter, band pass filter, high pass filter. These 6 right here are a great indicator of the tools you need to know. The missing one is notch, because you're not going to use a notch to filter the signal for a sidechain. Next up, what do we got over here? Fab Filter Pro Q2. I don't even use VST EQs because honestly, I don't think you need them. So that's a tour of the basic EQ and filter types. One more time, I want to make sure you have this in your brain. We have shelf EQs, high shelf and low shelf. We have parametric EQ for the mid-range, notch EQ or notch filter for cutting out stuff you don't want, and then a band pass filter, which is a combination of the high pass and low pass to keep a band of mids that you want. Now, if you want to go deeper with this, the best way to do it is honestly to learn by playing with them, and I built a hands-on lesson. Let me pause and open that one so you can see it. Okay, here we are inside a hands-on session lesson tutorial. That means the lesson is built inside Live. You do it in session view, and I recorded instructions, examples, and activities for you to play with right here inside Live, where we go through the different EQs and filters, low shelf, high shelf, parametric, and you get to do activities inside Live. Let me give you a little bit of a demo. Welcome to EQ and filter types. In this lesson, you're going to learn the basic tools we use for working with the frequency range of our music. Okay, so that's recorded in the lesson. You download the Live pack, open up the Ableton project, and you get the tutorial with the instructions and activities. Those look like this. Okay, let's get started with the low shelf EQ. Click on track 1 and do Shift Tab so you see EQ8, and then double click on the little spectrum window so you can see all the EQs. Now, band 1 is activated. It's set to 80 Hertz. Here is the frequency setting. Listen to what happens as I boost the shelf. Now, that exercise is a lot like what I just did in the video, so it might seem familiar. What we do in this project is go through the different types of EQs and filters, and you do activities. Your turn to play with the high shelf EQ, and you go through and do it so you can hear the sounds, learn by doing it, and understand what these EQs and filters can do to help your music. Then you get some advice on problems it solves, when to use this, examples in real life where it happens, and we go all the way through, bandpass filter, choosing the right EQ. Here's a little recipe of what to do to choose your EQs. Cut before you boost, the golden rule of EQ. A little bit of review at the end, and then where you can get help from me, Steve, at mixdetector.com if you want to really do this stuff for real. So check the link under this video where you can grab this hands-on session lesson tutorial and start using EQs and filters at a higher level without feeling confused or overwhelmed by the options. It's not that hard. There are only 7 basic types you need to know, and we just talked about what they are. Thanks a lot for watching. See you next time.